Hello everybody and welcome to another episode. In today's episode I'm going to show you how to replace the crankshaft position sensor from any common rail engine out there. So today I'm working on this Volkswagen Passat B6 from the year 2010, and this car has a 2.0 TDI engine, and in order for me to replace the sensor, which is located right there behind the oil filter housing and behind the oil filter cooling system, I will have to remove a lot of things, such as the EGR valve, the throttle body, the fans, the air filter housing, and also the air filter plastic parts from right here. This video, guys, will be a little bit longer than the usual videos which I made, and this is because I want to show you guys the entire process from start to finish on how to do this job and how to do it properly at home and without the need to pay someone else to do it in your place. So this is the new sensor which I bought for this car. This only cost me about 40 bucks, depends on the car and on the type of the engine which you have. This sensor can be a little bit expensive or a little bit inexpensive, depends on your car, like I said earlier. So this is how it's looking. This is what you'll have to replace. I don't recommend you guys to buy a used one. Always buy a new sensor, because this is not a sensor which you replace every day. This is a sensor which you replace only once or twice in the life of this vehicle. So to start this job, like I said earlier, I will not explain you guys everything which I'm going to do, because I also have other videos which will help you and which will show you guys how to remove other pieces, such as the EGR valve, such as the throttle body, the fans, the air filter, all of these parts. I already have videos on how to replace them, and especially on this type of cars. So I will put some links down below which will help you guys and which will guide you to do this job properly and secure. So first, let's begin with removing the air filter housing and all the plastic parts, and from there just follow what I'm doing. So the problem which I had with this sensor, normally if let's say you have a car and the car starts up, and after that the car shuts down automatically, and in a few seconds this can be one of your problems. So if the crankshaft position sensor doesn't read how many turns the engine rotate, this is meaning that the sensor has failed and is not working anymore, and you have to replace it. And it's also meaning that this sensor can be the problem, or you have another sensor, and that is the camshaft position sensor, and also the camshaft position sensor can be bad and you'll have to replace that one also. So in my case, the problem with the sensor is this one, the crankshaft sensor. So I'm going to replace this one, and in the future probably I will also replace the camshaft position sensor, just for my safety and just to be sure that the car will not have any problems in the future. So to replace the sensor from the camshaft, you'll have to remove the timing belt, otherwise you won't be able to remove the sensor. So I recommend you guys to replace the sensor just for your safety, just to be sure that you will not have any problem in the future, only when you are doing the timing belt replacing parts. So if you're not replacing the timing belt yet, I don't recommend you guys to replace the sensor. Just stay a little bit longer until the kilometers will add up and you replace the timing belt and also the sensor from the camshaft. After you're done with removing the air filter housing and all the parts from the air filter, you'll have to remove the fans, because if you don't remove the fans, you won't have access to remove the EGR valve and the throttle body. And in this way, if you don't remove the fans, it will be very difficult for you to do this job. So I recommend you guys to remove the fans first. You'll have one bolt in each corner, so you'll have 4 bolts in total, and you'll have to use Torx 30 to remove the bolts, and after that you'll have to remove the connector from underneath, this connector. And after that you'll have to remove the fans only from underneath the car, so the fans will only came down from the car. So I recommend you guys to lift the car up and put it on some jack stands, just enough space to create you some space to lower them down. As you can see in my case, like I did right here, you'll have to lower them down, or if you have an elevator or something like that, you can remove them completely from the car. But in my case, they don't bother me for now. I will only lower them halfway just to create me some space to remove the other parts. So right now I'm going to disconnect the connector from the throttle body, and the throttle body has 3 bolts. You'll have 2 bolts in the right side, and you'll have 1 bolt, which is a difficult one, right behind the throttle body, which also holds the EGR valve mounted on the car. After that, you'll have to remove the pipe which comes out from the throttle body and which goes into the intercooler. So you'll have this rubber pipe, this big hose which you'll have to disconnect from the throttle body, and after that you'll have to remove the 10mm bolt which is holding the dipstick mounted onto the throttle body. So after you remove those parts, the throttle body will come out very easy. Just make sure you don't lose any washers, you don't lose any seals, because otherwise you won't have them and you won't be able to install them back on the car. So if you also do this kind of job, I recommend you guys to clean the e-jar and the throttle body, and if you want to take it any further, you can also remove the intake manifold. I also have some videos which will show you guys and which will guide you on how to do this kind of jobs. Now what we have to do is to remove the e-jar valve. You'll have to disconnect the pipe which goes into the e-jar valve. You'll have to use an M14, something like that, and after that you'll have to remove the other hoses which hold the e-jar mounted onto the intake manifold, and you will have to disconnect the connector, the electrical connector, and after that the e-jar valve will come out from the car. This is how it's looking on this car. Make sure all the seals, like I told you earlier, are there. Make sure you don't lose anything. I recommend to put a piece of cloth inside the hose just to make sure that it won't have any debris inside it. And as you can see, this is what you have to remove. You'll have to remove the 5 bolts, I think. You'll have to remove 5 bolts from behind the oil filter, and those bolts are holding the oil filter housing and also the oil filter cooling part mounted onto the engine. So before doing that, you'll have to remove a lot of hoses. Just look what hoses I'm removing. You'll have to remove the hoses from the thermostat. You'll have to remove the hoses which cover the oil filter housing, and you'll also have to remove the connector which goes from the fuel pump ramp, which goes to the cooling sensors, which goes into the e-jar valve, which goes into the throttle body, and so on. You'll have to remove all of these connectors and put them away, because otherwise you won't have enough space to remove the parts. Just follow what I'm doing. After you remove the hoses from the cooling system, some coolant will come out from the engine and also from the cooling system reservoir. And I want to tell you guys just to prepare some brand new coolant after you're done with this kind of job, and put the coolant back into the engine. I don't recommend you guys to reuse the old coolant, because in this way you will probably put some debris and some dirt from from the old coolant back into the system, so I don't recommend you guys that. I recommend you to only put a brand new coolant. For this kind of car, for Volkswagen cars especially, you'll have to use G12, you'll have to use a red coolant, and normally it should came already diluted, so you don't have to worry about anything. You only have to add it up, you have to flush the system, and in this way you'll be good to go. So this is the location for all the connectors from this part of the engine. So you have to remove, I think, 5 connectors from each sensor, from the cooling sensor, from the fuel pump, from the camshaft sensor, from the EGR, from the throttle body, and I think there is one more. And you'll have to remove all of this. You'll have to put it away in the right side, because in this way they will not bother you, and in this way you will not possibly break them by mistake or bend them in any way which will not make them work in the future. So in this way you'll be safe, and it will be a little bit easier for you to remove everything and to work on this type of the engine. So as you can see, I removed the entire connectors, I removed them from the mounting clips, and now I have a little bit more space to remove the other parts from the engine. Another thing which I recommend you guys to do is to buy the brand new seals from the oil filter cooler, from the oil filter, and also from the EGR and the throttle body, if you are able to buy them. So if you want to make sure that you are doing a perfect job, if you don't want to have any problems in the future related to any leaks or something like that, I recommend you guys to buy the new seals and install them, and in this way you will know for sure that you will do a perfect job. In my case, I already bought them, so when I'm going to install everything back on the car, I will also install new seals from the oil filter cooler and from the EGR and the throttle body. So in this case, I will not for sure that I will not have any problems in the future related to this kind of job. So right here I go underneath the car because I had to remove the pipe which goes from the thermostat, and in this way I also had to remove the coolant from this pipe, and I had to put a bucket under my car just to not split the entire cooler on the floor. And in this way it will be a little bit easier for me to remove the other parts, like I said earlier. So far, this is what I removed from the engine, and this is how much space I already have. So I removed this hose from the thermostat which goes down there. After that I have this hose, and it goes right there in the right side. And after that you'll have to remove the bolts which are holding the oil filter housing onto the engine. And on the right side you won't be able to remove the bolts unless you remove those 2 hoses which came from the gearbox. So you'll have to remove also those 2 hoses from the right side of the oil housing, and after that you'll have to remove the bolts from the right side. Da, scusa. Da, mare, pure che posso vedere. Hai da vedere quello che non cazzo di vedere tanto. Ok, se piaceva? Ok, no, ok, state. Okay everybody, so this is how it's looking so far. I removed the hoses which came from the gearbox into the oil cooler. I also removed the bolts from the left side of the oil cooler mounting support and also the bolts from the right side. And now you have to remove this sensor from the right side, and also you have to remove the return pipe from the oil. You'll have to use a 17mm key and a 19mm key to remove the sensor and the pipe which goes into the oil filter itself. And after that you will be able to remove the oil filter completely from the engine. I want to tell you guys to not worry about anything when you're doing this job. You will not lose any oil from the engine. You will only use a little bit of oil which you have inside the oil filter. You will lose about 100 or 200 milliliters of oil, and if you want, at the end of the job you could check the oil level, and if you see that the oil level is a little bit low, you can add more oil into the engine, and that's it. You don't have to worry about anything. The oil will not come out from the engine, so you will only lose what's inside the oil filter, and that's it. Okay everybody, just look how the sensor is installed onto the oil filter. This is the sensor, this is what you have to remove, and after you remove the sensor you'll have to remove the pipe which goes inside the oil filter. This kind of pipe, you'll have to remove this bolt, and after that you'll be able to remove the oil filter housing and the oil filter cooler out from the engine. Okay everybody, as also I removed the oil filter housing along with the oil filter cooler, and now I'm able to see the crankshaft position sensor and the location of the sensor on this type of car and on this type of engine. Remember, on different engines, doesn't matter if they are common rail, the sensor can be in a different place, and in some cases the sensor is right underneath the car and it's in a very open space and you are able to remove it very easy. But in some cases the sensor is right here and it's a little bit difficult to remove and to replace it. So this is the sensor, this is how it's looking, this is the connector from the sensor, and also this is where the oil filter housing was installed. This is the seal which I talked about, and this is the seal which I recommend you guys to replace just to make sure that you will not have any leaks in the future. As you can see, this is how it's looking. Normally it's a metal seal, but probably on different engines probably this will be a little different. This is how it's looking, and also as you can see, this is my oil filter housing along with the cooler. In this case, right now, I also recommend you guys to clean everything out. I'm going to clean the oil filter housing, I'm going to clean the cooler and everything. I'm going to replace the seal from the cooler and the seal from the cooler, which is in the middle of the oil filter and the cooler. So the seal between them, I'm going to replace it, and I'm going to put everything back together as it was before, and I'm going to make sure that this job is a perfect job and I will not have any problems in the future. So as you can see guys, I removed the crankshaft position sensor from right here. This is the flywheel, as you can see. So the sensor was installed right there. It was installed with a small bolt, and in order for you to remove the bolt you'll have to use a L key like this. I also used this one. Both of those tools helped me to remove the crankshaft position sensor, and the sensor, it's the original sensor. This sensor have never been replaced. As you can see, it also broke out. So guys, if you break the sensor inside it, it will be a very difficult job to do. So just take your time, don't hurry guys, don't bend the sensor. It's also difficult to remove the connector. In my case it was a little bit difficult to remove even the connector because everything was so cooked, everything was so hard to push and hard to bend. But eventually I was able to remove it. So this is how it's looking. This is how it's looking, the new sensor. And right here, as you can see, I have the cooler and the oil filter housing all cleaned out. I also replaced the seal. So this is the seal between them. I installed the new seals back on the pieces. This is the brand new seal which goes right here in the middle of the engine and in the middle of the oil filter. So from here I cleaned everything up and I'm going to put everything back on the car. I'm not going to film everything because in this way the video will be very long and I don't want to make it so long. As you can see, right here I'm done with installing everything back on the car. I installed the sensor back into position. Don't tighten the sensor too much. So as you can see here, I'm adding new coolant into the system. So red coolant from this for these Volkswagen cars, and this will be the first time when I'm starting the car. I didn't start it yet. I wanted to make it right here. I wanted to record on the video how the car is starting. Okay everybody, as you can see, the car did start very well. So this is meaning that the new sensor is in a very good condition. So this is meaning that the job that we did is perfectly. So this is all I have to do. I will have to check later if I had any leaks or if I had any problems, but that's it. Thank you all for watching. This helped to replace the crankshaft position sensor on any common rail engine. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video and found it informative, please leave a like and a comment down below. See you next time.